You can be opening up to Isaiah chapter 10. As the slide says, that's where we're going to be starting our study tonight. It's great to see you all tonight. Second Sunday night of every month, there's usually a chance for someone to preach, and I'm very happy to have that chance tonight and to share with you some of the great words from Isaiah that I hope will be encouraging and helpful and challenging for us tonight. You know, if you were to take a course in American history, like most of us have at some point, probably like the ones that Ryan teaches all the time, you spend a lot of time on the years leading up to the American Revolution, right? We all have some familiarity with things like the Boston Massacre and the Boston Tea Party and the Declaration of Independence, and we spend a lot of time in history thinking about those moments that led up to the revolution and led up to the start of the nation. Well, why do we do that? It's because we recognize that those moments have a special significance. The things that people were thinking about and talking about, the events that were going on, the people who were on the scene at that moment helped shape who we were going to be as a nation. Everything that was happening in the years leading up to 1776 and us declaring independence set the stage for the nation that we would become. Even the ideals of that time were put down in things like the Declaration of Independence, saying these are the things that America thinks are important. Independence and liberty and freedom and democracy. You know, we start prescribing who we're going to be, and so we pay special attention to those things. Imagine if a politician came up and said, I'm going to be the kind of leader that our founding fathers envisioned. That's my stance for this country. For all of us, that would mean something. You know, that would conjure something in our mind. Okay, I'm going to be committed to certain principles and ideals because we know how our country was started. Well, when Jesus comes on the scene, the Jewish people are also looking for a king. A new nation is going to begin, but it's not, of course, a political kingdom, and it's not like the kingdom that they're thinking of, but it's really important for us to understand what they were thinking, and especially what God said was going to be happening in the coming kingdom. What we're going to do tonight in Isaiah 10 and 11 and 12 is to look at the description of who the coming king was going to be. Because when Jesus comes on the scene, he says, the time is fulfilled and the kingdom of God is at hand. Repent and believe in the gospel. These are Jesus' first words in the Gospel of Mark. The time is here and the kingdom of God is at hand. That kingdom that you heard about, Jewish people, that you read about, that you're anticipating, it's here. I'm it. But what was it? What were those principles that Jesus said, I've come here to fulfill? That's what we're going to dig into and find from Isaiah chapters 10 and 11 and 12. And there's other places too where the coming king is talked about, but I think this is going to give us a really nice picture of who Jesus was coming to be and this foretelling of who he was going to be that helps set the stage for everything that he then steps into as king. It's going to give us that foundational understanding that people in Jesus' day, if they were searching and if they were familiar with the scriptures, would have had in anticipation of the coming king. Here's where we're going to go, just so you have a very high-level sense of our direction. We're going to talk about how God rules and how he is in charge of the world order. Specifically, then, we're going to look at Jesus as the instrument of God's rule and what his characteristics are and how he's going to act and what type of king he's going to be. We'll think about how Jesus unites his enemies, or unites enemies in this kingdom and brings together people who were far apart. And then our response to this great kingdom, what we do to belong to it, and what we do as a result of it. Okay, so briefly before we dive into Isaiah chapter 10, since we're in the middle of a book, I want to set just a little bit of context just to get our minds moving in the right direction. So Isaiah is writing in the late 700s, or I don't know how you do it with BC. Let's say 740 to 680 BC, the days that are the very end of the divided kingdom. So If you know your Bible history, 722 is when the northern nation of Assyria is toppled. So we're right at the very end of the nation of Israel. The nation of Judah is going to hang around for another 150 years, but I would say they're already on a downward trajectory. This is a disappointing, difficult, hard time in Israelite history, where they are falling further and further from God, and the prophets are coming one after another, encouraging the people to get their heads back on straight, to listen to God, and they're being continually rejected, and Isaiah was no exception to that. For a theme of the book, it's hard when the book is so long, but Isaiah comes and talks a lot about the coming judgment for the people's lack of listening and hard hearts, but all throughout the way he also plants these seeds of a remnant that's going to return, that's going to be saved, that's going to be renewed, and so mixed right in there with judgment is also a hope that's a little bit more forward-looking. There's two big sections that you should know about that are going to take us up to chapter 10, where we're going to start. In chapters 1 through 5, it is just all the charges that are against Israel and Judah. You could look in like the very beginning of the book. Isaiah chapter 1 and verse 2, God comes right out and says, "Hear, O heavens, and give ear, O earth, for the Lord has spoken. Children have I reared and brought up, but they have rebelled against me." That's the start. You all were supposed to be my children. You're not being good children. You're being rebellious. You're far off. In chapter 5, we have this idea of Israel as the vineyard, but their fruit is rotten. And God says, I'm not going to protect you anymore. I'm going to remove the protection that I had because you're not bearing fruit, and you're going to have to face the consequences of what you've been doing. So it is a dark and challenging opening to the book. It is judgment and laying out what the people have been doing wrong, which makes it really surprising that the next section is something called the triumph of grace, at least according to one commentator. And I think that's a good way to talk about it. Out of all of this darkness, God still says, I'm going to provide hope and new life. So we have the call of Isaiah, and Isaiah is before the Lord in his throne room, and God says, you are forgiven, you can go and be my prophet. Go share this news, but by the way, the people aren't going to listen. They're not going to listen, and they're going to be chopped down like a tree, but from that stump, I'm going to do something new. Again, this idea of judgment and hope. And then in chapter 9, right before where we start in Isaiah 10, there's this great promise that a child is going to come, and he's going to be the Prince of Peace, and he's going to sit on David's throne. So we're in a section where despite how wicked God's people have been, he is giving them hope. And we're going to see those two themes go back and forth. With that, let's get into the text. Isaiah chapter 10, and we're going to start reading in verse 5. Here in verse 5, God is talking to the Assyrians who he's going to use to punish Israel. Isaiah 10 and verse 5. Woe to Assyria, the rod of my hands is my fury. Against a godless nation I send him, and against the people of my wrath I command him to take spoil and seize plunder. Okay, so God is talking to the Assyrians here, and he says, you all are the instrument of my wrath. You're the rod that's in my hand that I'm going to use to strike down people who aren't doing what's right. And in this case, my very own people in the north, in Israel. You guys will be the instrument that I'm going to use to judge others. But Assyria is not content with that role. They are full of pride, and they think, wow, we are really all that. We have so much power. Look at verse 7. This is about Assyria. He does not so intend, and his heart does not so think. It is in his heart to destroy and to cut off nations, not a few. For he says, are not my commanders all kings? I've got a lot of kings. I've got a lot of power. I've got a lot of strength. We're going to see that developed more. Assyria says, I have the power. We are the nation that is in charge of the world at this point. We are running things, and we are the ultimate power. They fail to realize that they're really just a part in God's bigger plan. And so God promises his people, yes, they're going to come and they're going to wipe out the northern kingdom, but then I'll take care of them too. One of the things that's really cool in these chapters and in a lot of the prophets is there's a lot of visual imagery. I'm going to ask for a raise of hands. How many of you would say that you're a visual learner? Okay, good. That's like well over half. Incidentally, I asked that question in the high school class downstairs like last Wednesday, and they all raised their hands. And I thought, I really should be using visuals in this class. I really should not just be talking around the table here. It's getting me at least to the board to write things down more, so we're taking baby steps. But a lot of us like visuals, and visuals help get our minds going. And when the prophets speak, they use a lot of imagery to give pictures of what's going on. So check this out. I think you'll find this very interesting. This will kind of tell the story of what's going on with Assyria, and yet with God still being in control, even though it looks like the world is kind of falling apart and God's northern kingdom is falling, and what's going on. Assyria, chapter 10 and verse 14, they say, "We are plunderers." Look at chapter 10 and verse 14. This is Assyria speaking. "My hand has found a nest, the wealth of the peoples. And as one gathers eggs that have been forsaken, so I have gathered all the earth, and there was none that moved a wing or opened the mouth or chirped." Okay, what are they saying? Assyria is saying, it's so easy for us to pick off other people and to pick off their stuff. It's like you came up on this nest, unattended. How hard is it to grab that? That's as easy as can be. We are so strong that we come up to other people, we see what we want, take it, it's ours. So they are really confident in their own abilities. But in the very next verse, God gives them a different picture that we've already talked about. He says, no, actually, you are just my instrument. Look at chapter 10 and verse 15. "Shall the axe boast over him who hews with it, or the saw magnify itself against him who wields it?" God says, you might see yourself as this strong and mighty and able to just take whatever you want, but actually, you're just going to be used for my purposes, and your power is not going to go on forever. And in fact, speaking of an axe, you're going to be chopped down. Chapter 10, verses 33 and 34. This is after we get this description of Assyria marching right up to the gates to take Jerusalem, and they want to take everything. They want to take even the southern kingdom, which God is not letting them have at this point, but Assyria is strong and powerful. And then chapter 10 and verse 33. "Behold, the Lord God of hosts will lop the boughs with terrifying power. The great in height will be hewn down, and the lofty will be brought low. He will cut down the thickets of the forest with an axe, and Lebanon will fall by the majestic one." So I tried to find the biggest tree felling picture that I could find. This is a giant sequoia in California that had been chopped down. Not life anymore, a little small shoot is going to pop back up. Same idea as the remnant, and as God restoring hope. It starts small, a shoot from the stump of Jesse. God is beginning to bring forth a promise of life out of lifelessness. And notice too that it's from Jesse. There's only one king in the Bible who is described as being from Jesse, and that's David. Everybody else is described as being from David, but nobody else is described as being from Jesse. In other words, God is not just saying, I'm going to send you another one in the line of David. He says, I'm going to send you another David. I'm going to send you another one of my kings, my chosen leaders, and it's going to be different than the leadership that you've been knowing lately. And we're going to get into the characteristics of what that was going to look like here in just a second. But I want us to kind of pause at all of this imagery and think for just a bit about what we can conclude from this idea of God ruling before we go on to characteristics of Jesus. A couple of simple things. God brings life to lifeless places, right? He cuts down, but he can restore. And we see this in our own lives individually. We can see this as a collective, that when there is lifelessness and when things seem dark, God is still able to work. God is able to bring back hope and life. Another great picture from the prophets that you could tie in would be the valley of dry bones that Ezekiel sees, right? There's no life. What's going to happen here? What am I even supposed to be seeing, Ezekiel thinks. And then God puts flesh back on the valley of dry bones. no matter how hopeless things seem to us, God is able to put life back there. He also rules in the affairs of kingdoms and peoples. And I think this chapter is just like a really great way to see that, because God is able to speak with such confidence and certainty about what's going to happen. Yes, Assyria will rise. Yes, Assyria will conquer. Yes, Assyria will fall. He can see the end from the beginning. And he is able to know and influence and shape the way that things are going to go throughout history. And that is something that should give us such confidence and such hope. Because you have to think about what this would have felt like for God's people as they were going through this. When the northern kingdom falls, and then a little bit later the southern kingdom will fall, foreign armies are coming into the promised land, and they're taking over, and they are destroying, and they are taking God's people captive. You have to wonder about the worry and the anxiousness that would have come over God's people. Is God still on his throne? Is God still in control? What's going on? God gives these messages in advance to say, yes, I know this is going to happen. I'm in charge of this happening, and this is not the end of the story. And so if we start to think about a little bit of application, God is every bit as in control of our story today and our world today, even though it looks just as chaotic. I decided to go on a news website, which is like my least favorite thing to do in the world, this afternoon, just to see what was fresh and what to bring, right? So this is Our World Today, front page headlines: inflation and interest rates continue climbing. When will it ever stop? Can the Fed get it under control? Stories about Hamas and all the trouble in Israel and Palestine. Then you get to like, okay, something closer to home. Boys struggle in school, boys falling farther behind, more tutors needed for boys. And then let's go international. Argentina swears in, quote, madman, new reformer president. All right, so just like, well, however you want to think. We got domestic, we got international, we got Middle East, we got close to home. It's terrible. And it's all falling apart, and read page 2 or tune in to hear more. You know, like that is the world that we're swimming in, and it influences us. There is a lot of chaos out there. Ryan was talking about this morning, rightly so. We're headed into another election cycle. You know, here we go again. And the world is constantly churning, just like it was churning for God's people in this time, but God is in control. God's message today is the same as it was back then. He can see who's going to rise and who's going to fall. And he wants his people to know, I'm in control. I'm in control. I can bring life. I can stand up. I can knock down. Take heart. I'm in control. Because really, God's interest is in setting up a different kind of kingdom. God has the power and does step in and influence world events as he needs to. He's the King of Kings. But what he cares about most is an entirely different kingdom, like we were talking about at the beginning. And that takes us to Jesus' righteous reign. Back to the text, Isaiah 11 and verse 2. And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. And his delight shall be in the fear of the Lord. He shall not judge by what his eyes see, or decide disputes by what his ears hear. But with righteousness he shall judge the poor, and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. And he shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked. Righteousness shall be the belt of his waist, and faithfulness the belt of his loins. God says, I'm going to send forth a new David, a new king. Let's figure out what he's going to be like. You'll notice there are 7 different spirits that are said to be on him, usually a significant number. The first is the Spirit of the Lord from verse 2. And again, we said a new David is coming. If you remember when David was anointed by Samuel in 1 Samuel 16, the Spirit of the Lord rushes upon him. God says, yes, this is my king, and I'm going to be with him. And the Spirit remained with David. Jesus comes, the Spirit of the Lord is going to be upon him. You can even think about when Jesus is baptized and the Spirit of the Lord descends on him, again saying, this is my king, this is my beloved son, listen to him. Same idea. He's going to have, in verse 2 also, the Spirit of wisdom and the Spirit of understanding. If the Spirit of the Lord is a callback to David, then wisdom and understanding is a callback to Solomon. right? When Solomon becomes king in 1 Kings 3, God says, what would you like? Anything you want, I'll give you. And Solomon said, I'm going to be king. It's a big job. Can I please have wisdom and understanding? And God said, yes. I'm glad that you asked for that. That's something that I want to define my kings, to have wisdom and understanding, to know how to lead, to know how to rule, to know how to make good decisions. Jesus is going to be the perfect fulfillment of that. He's got the spirit of counsel and might. Anything that he needs to know, he is able to know, and he has the strength to go forth and carry it out and execute it. What king wouldn't want to have that, right? All counsel, all might. And then it's ultimately rooted in the spirit of the knowledge and the fear of the Lord, which makes this king incredibly different from other kings. Because look at the attributes. He is powerful. He is impressive. He's wise and understanding. He knows how to make the right decisions, and he knows how to carry them out. And if this was any other king, he would really think that he was great, and he would want to do things his way, and he would want to put his stamp on the kingdom and on the empire. But yet this king, we're told, is going to lead with God at the heart, with the knowledge of the Lord and the fear of the Lord guiding him. It's reminiscent of when Jesus comes and he says, I can do nothing apart from the Father's will, and I speak where God speaks. And he pictures himself as in submission to God. A king, an all-powerful king who's in submission because he recognizes that he needs to carry out God's purposes and God's plan. We also get a sense of how he reigns. That's verses 3 through 5. I said he gets to the heart of the matter. Did you notice in verse 3, he doesn't judge by what his eyes see or decide by what his ears hear, but he judges with righteousness and equity. He is able to truly see into people's hearts. You can't fool this king. You can't put on a good face. You can't just try to curry favor with him in a way that's shallow and not genuine. He is able to see right through all of that and to make sure that people are treated fairly with righteousness and equity for the poor and the meek. A lot of times in the prophets, God specifically got on his people and the leaders of his people for mistreating the poor and the lowly and the people who couldn't speak up for themselves. And he said, you guys are running roughshod over the very people who you should be caring for the most because they can't care for themselves. Well, this king is going to care for them. And there's so many pictures of Jesus we could point to of him spending time with the meek and the lowly and giving them a voice and giving them a fair shake. He was going to be a king who wasn't wowed by everyone else's power or status or by what his eyes see. He's going to come and he's going to treat everyone with kindness. He's going to treat everyone with fairness. There's going to be no partiality. Anybody is going to get a fair hearing from this king. It's pretty cool. But he's also strong and fierce and powerful, right? He kills the wicked. In the second half of verse 4, he shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked. So part of his kingship is not tolerating evil. It's not all just sunshine and rainbows, even though he's a perfect king. There is a standard in this kingdom, and he is going to uphold it, and he's going to judge, which makes the fact that he cares for the meek and the lowly and the everyday people, and that he's gentle at heart, makes it all the more amazing. Because it's not that he doesn't have the strength. It's that he's willing to hold back for people. And he's clothed in righteousness and faithfulness, there in verse 5. I was thinking about why would it say that this king is clothed in righteousness and faithfulness? Okay, it's around him, it encircles him, and this is just my thought on the matter, so take it for what it's worth. But I think clothing kind of helps make a first impression, right? Like, if I bumped into any of you guys at Schnucks, I could kind of maybe size up by your clothing, like where you're coming from, right? If you're coming from work, that might look different than if you're coming from the gym. It might look different than my special of going out at 9:30, kind of already in your PJs for a pint of ice cream. Like, you can tell a little bit from someone's clothing what's going on with them. It's a first impression. I look at you, I can see that about you. We look at Jesus, what's he wearing? What's around him? What is he showing to anyone who sees him? Righteousness and faithfulness encircling him. right there. We see Jesus, that's what we see, righteousness and faithfulness. Everyone gets a fair shake. He is a just king. He is equitable. Those are the very things that are around him that define him. Okay. So, I think the learnings from here are fairly straightforward, but I still want to bring them out. A new ruler is coming, and he is unlike any earthly king, right? Where else could we get that list of attributes that we just saw? That combination of strength and gentleness, of perfect wisdom, but also still submission to God's plan. This king is really going to be something to behold. This quote is from a commentary by Motyer. It said, "In David's line, king after king had failed, whether by character defect or administrative failings. In this king, character and rule are in total harmony." Right? So there were some kings who messed up because they were bad people. There were some kings of David who messed up because they were incompetent. This king is going to be perfectly able and a perfect character to carry out everything God wants him to carry out. And he's interested in our hearts. We can't fool him. He's going to see. We can't put something on that we think is going to be pleasing. Maybe other people think it's genuine. Jesus is going to see right through that. He shall not judge by what his eyes see or decide disputes by what his ears hear. It should be a good thing for us, but it's also a sobering thing for us that Jesus is going to know what's in our hearts. He wants us to be true to him, to be honest, to be open, to be genuine in our faith and in our dealings to other people, because he is able to see all the way down to our hearts. Okay, so that's God's rule. That's God setting up his king and the incredible attributes of that king. Let's look at some of the results of life in that kingdom. Jesus unites enemies. Isaiah 11, 6-9. "The wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the young goat, and the calf and the lion and the fatted calf together, and a little child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall graze, their young shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. The nursing child shall play over the hole of the cobra, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the adder's den. They shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea." Okay, so told you we had a lot of cool pictures and images that get our minds going here from the prophets. These few verses are actually what got me most interested in this chapter and saying, oh, that's what I want to preach on. I was reading this and I thought, that's some amazing pictures that are in this chapter. That the wolf is going to lie down with the lamb and the leopard's going to lie down with the young goat. And you can't really find images to put on your slide that demonstrate that because it's not how it works out there. I decided to dip my toe in some AI computer-generated images so that you get a picture like this, because this doesn't happen. Not in our world does a leopard and a young goat lie down together. You know, it's showing something that is different than the nature that we know. In fact, it's a reconciling of enemies. Same idea with the wolf and the lamb. I mean, that is as much of two opposing forces as we can picture. But now, they're lying down together. They're dwelling together. They're in harmony. What does it mean? It's a reconciliation. It's taking things that were far apart, that could never get along, and combining them back in harmony. I was talking about this point with Ryan, and I said, like, something to the effect of, this would never happen in nature, obviously, and he said, right, except for the garden. You know, and it points us back towards the Garden of Eden in Genesis 1, where, like, everything is existing in harmony, and even, you know, man is kind of given originally this charge of eating fruit and vegetables, and there's seems to be a much more peaceful existence. This is pointing us back that when this king comes, there's going to be a level of peace and reconciliation that blows our minds. That is as wild as this image and as wild as this next image, these next two images, let's say. So in verse 7, we have a change of nature. The cow and the bear shall graze, their young shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. The lion is now just down eating straw like a cow. His nature has been changed from a meat eater to a straw eater, from aggressive to peaceful. Something fundamentally is changing in nature from this kingdom. And then the third point, is a reversal of the curse. right? So in Genesis 3, fundamental part of the Bible, God says the serpent and mankind, the offspring of the woman, are going to be at enmity. Serpent and man are not going to get along. Look at verse 8. The nursing child shall play over the hole of the cobra, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the adder's den. Well, there's a reversal of the curse. Mankind and the serpent able to coexist. It's something that's radically different from what we know. Again, you're going to get an AI image here, so this isn't real. Don't have a heart attack. But, picture me and Jude out in the backyard, and we've got some grass behind the house, and so I'm going in to check on dinner for a second, and I come back out, and I see this. I mean, it's terrifying. Even not real. Ryan told me to put Jude's face on there, and I couldn't do it. It just made me too sick. This isn't how it works, right? There is a level of reconciliation and a level of reversal to everything that's happened from the king. What I want you to get is not just that everything's turned upside down. Why is it turned upside down? Because this kingdom is so different. We talked about the reconciling of enemies, the change of nature, the reversal of the curse. All of that comes from verse 9. They shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. If we want to see reconciliation, if we want to see change, if we want to see the hope of the curse reversed, it all has to be rooted in a knowledge of God. That is the thing that his king is going to help bring, and that's the thing that has the potential to change all of the brokenness and the hostility that defines the world around us. So peace defines Jesus' kingship and Jesus' kingdom, and that's us here on the earth. I think there's two senses in which this passage is true about the wolf and the lamb together and the baby able to play with the cobra. There's a very future-looking sense where Jesus is going to right everything in eternity, and there's perfect peace and harmony in a way that we can't know today. But there's also a more near-term fulfillment, that when Jesus' kingship starts and when his kingdom is established, which is now us here as part of that, that these things are also going to be true, that there is going to be a reconciliation between God and man. That's Ephesians chapter 2, that we were dead and we were far apart from God, and yet Jesus paid the price and could bring those things together. Just like there's a reconciliation of creatures and of nature, there's going to be a reconciliation of God and man that this is ultimately pointing to. A reconciliation among men. It's not that we can bring peace to the world. Unfortunately, as much as we'd love to do that, that's not going to happen right now. But within the kingdom, there is a reconciliation. The divides of Jew and Gentile, of male and female, of, in the Bible time, slave and free, of all these different people, all can come in and all can have this kind of equality and reconciliation and togetherness that is as wild as a wolf and a lamb getting along. It's possible inside the kingdom. A changed nature. In our case, no longer do we look to ourselves for all the answers in life. Our nature changes to start depending on God, to start trusting in God and saying, God, I'm going to let you be the one to take care of problems for me. And then ultimately, a hope for the reversal of the curse. That we look forward to everything being brought right according to God's promises, that everything that was fallen in this world can be changed because of the king. Okay. So we're on to the last part. We know God's ultimate rule. We talked about Jesus' perfect reign, and we talked about the harmony on earth, and in some ways that'd be a really satisfying place to end. But I think I want to close by thinking about our response. Because this is wonderful news, it's exciting, it's uplifting, but what do we do with it? Two things. Number one, for those outside, you follow the highway in. Chapter 11 and verse 10, please. In that day, the root of Jesse, who shall stand as a signal for the peoples, of him shall the nations inquire, and his resting place shall be glorious. In that day the Lord will extend his hand a second time to recover the remnant that remains of his people, from Assyria, from Egypt, from Pathros, and on. And then go down to verse 16. And there will be a highway from Assyria for the remnant that remains of his people, as there was for Israel when they came up from the land of Egypt. What's being said here? God's saying, you know the way that I paved a straight path for my people to come out of slavery and into the promised land, and there was a road that they could follow out? I'm going to have another one of those straight roads leading right out for anyone who wants to come take that highway out. Notice all the place names there in verse 11. God is going to again give an offer to his people from wherever you're from Assyria, from Egypt, from Pathros, from Cush, from all corners. Anybody who wants in this kingdom now, follow the highway in. The road is laid. Everything is available. How do we know how to find it? We follow the king. We look for that sign. Verse 10 says, the root of Jesse will stand as a signal for the peoples. Jesus will hold up himself as a signal and say, if you want in, just follow me. And that is an amazing opportunity for us both to know and appreciate and to go and share with people. To go and tell others that the kingdom is at hand and that it's available to come into. But the last thing is that for those of us inside, we have another response, and that is worship and appreciation for all that God's done. And so we close with a few verses from chapter 12. Go over to chapter 12. This is building right off the back of everything that God has done. How do we then pour it back out to him? Chapter 12 and verse 1, you will say in that day, I will give thanks to you, O Lord, for though you were angry with me, your anger turned away, that you might comfort me. Behold, God is my salvation. I will trust and will not be afraid, for the Lord God is my strength and my song, and he has become my salvation. With joy you will draw water from the wells of salvation, and you will say in that day, give thanks to the Lord, call upon his name, make known his deeds among the people, proclaim that his name is exalted, sing praises to the Lord, for he has done gloriously. Let this be made known in all the earth, shout and sing for joy, O inhabitant of Zion, for great in your midst is the Holy One of Israel. So many good things that we can learn about worship. I just want to draw out a couple from chapter 12. Worship leads us to appreciate our salvation more. You will say in that day, I will give thanks to you, O Lord. When we come to worship, that's what we're coming to do, to thank God for the things that he has done for us. To recognize that he's strong and he's powerful and he has the right to be angry with us, as we talked about earlier, that the king can strike down evil. But with all of us, he gave us another chance and he's welcomed us in, and we can experience that and we can appreciate that salvation. Worship lets us trust in God. Verse 2, God is my salvation. I'll trust and I'll not be afraid. This is just like the Song of Moses, right after that first Exodus that Isaiah was talking about. I trust in God. He just let us out of slavery. And then metaphorically, that's what he's done for us too. I trust in God. Who else am I going to trust? That's how we sing things like, the Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? Because we recognize that God is worthy of trust. Worship inspires joy. Verse 3, with joy you draw water from the wells of salvation. And it's a great picture of a well that you can dip into again and again and again and get more joy out every time. It's a well that doesn't run dry. There is continual joy and continual salvation on offer from God. And it's how we can sing things like, the joy of the Lord will be my strength. I will not waver, walking by faith. We come back to that well over and over and continue to see what God's done for us. And worship inspires sharing our joy. Verses 4 through 6 shift from singular to plural. I'm so excited for what God has done for me. We are so excited for what God has done for us. Come share, come participate. God has redeemed all of us. And it's this collective, communal sharing that we're all drawing up water out of our own well of joy of salvation. We are all appreciating the things that God has done. That will lead to beautiful worship. You know, I think sometimes we want to start with the end. Let's just worship God with more spirit and more fervor, and let's get pumped up, and let's have that feeling, and let's really just get excited and feel good. This chapter sets things in the proper order. If we want that feeling, and that's fine to want a feeling, we should want to connect with God, to be excited. But the way that we get it is not to start with the feeling, it's to start with the remembering of what God's done for us. It's to go back to the well and think for ourselves where we were before we knew God, and where He's brought us and where He's leading us. And to dwell on that and to keep pouring that over in our minds again and again. And then we show up to worship and we're ready to go. It doesn't matter, if the song is perfectly on key. It doesn't matter if there are distractions. It doesn't matter if I feel tired, because my heart has been set. I am appreciating the things that God has done. I'm appreciating being in His kingdom. Worship is going to pour out. That is how we get the kind of worship that we're looking for, is by appreciating and remembering the things that God has done for us. Okay. So God rules, and we trust in Him. Jesus reigns, and we get to follow Him and imitate Him. Jesus brings peace, and we get to share and personify that peace. And Jesus inspires us to worship from our heart and to tell people to take that highway to Him. I love these pictures from Isaiah. I hope they've given us things to think about. I hope that the visual nature of it will help put some things in our minds to stick around. And I hope that next time we think about how we want to show up and how we want to worship, that we'll root it in what God has done for us, in how wonderful His kingdom is, in that great hope, and that will then inspire all the things that we're looking to have in our hearts. If there's anything we can do tonight to encourage, to support, or to welcome anybody in, if there's anything at all that we can do, just let us know while we stand and sing.